So we're going to look at a key issue in economics, which is what are the causes of poverty in well-off countries, rich countries, such as the UK and the USA. And we're talking about relative poverty and absolute poverty. Well, here there are 6 key causes which we can examine. The first one is unemployment. If you're unemployed, you will experience a loss of income, a substantial loss of income that may suddenly cause you to end up in an impoverished situation. It might be different though if the cause of unemployment is frictional or cyclical or structural. Structural is likely to lead to long-term unemployment because you've got the wrong skills and you're living in the wrong place. And this may lead to a sort of chronic long-term loss of income. Cyclical, perhaps less so. When the economy picks up, you might get a job back again. And certainly frictional is short-term and maybe less of a problem, although brief periods of unemployment can still send people to food banks. Another growing problem is that of underemployment and job insecurity. So underemployment, of course, is when you're working part-time, involuntarily, because you want to work full-time. You're working fewer hours than you want to. You want to work more hours. You're overqualified for the work you're doing. So, for example, if you're a library assistant, but you're a highly trained, qualified solicitor, and these will lead to lower wages. So the causes of job insecurity and unemployment are often zero-hour contracts, the gig economy, jobs like working for Deliveroo, and I say job because they could be considered to be self-employed, of course, even though they've got one main employer. Also taxi drivers for Uber, perhaps, and also people who need or involved with flexible working and childcare. Okay, so this job insecurity and underemployment can often lead to a sudden fall in income, perhaps one week or another week, necessitating huge problems such as the need to maybe visit a food bank or something like that, which people are recommended for. Another cause of poverty are the increase in wage differentials. So there's an increase in lower paid work. This has occurred because of a fall in trade union power and representation in many countries, such as the USA and the UK notably. In the UK, 13 million people were members of trade unions in 1979. Now it's down to about 7 million. And trade unions are a countervailing force, according to J.K. Galbraith. In other words, you've got the monopsony power of big firms, and you've got the countervailing force of trade unions pushing up wages, whereas the big firms are pushing them down. Also, you've got globalization outsourcing, so jobs, for example, are removed and go to India, such as call centres that used to be in the northeast or in Glasgow. You've got profit share of the national cake, of the national income has increased, whereas the wage share has fallen. Some argue by about 6% over the last 2 decades or so. And of course Marx referred to this, that workers are fighting owners for profits versus wages. And what's happened recently in the last few decades is profits have increased, indeed assets have increased in value, whereas wages have fallen. Deindustrialization is perhaps a root cause of a lot of these issues. So there are fewer well-paid, skilled manual jobs. So there are fewer miners, fewer shipbuilders, fewer steel workers, and they're replaced by service sector jobs, which are sometimes part-time, of course, in places like Starbucks and McDonald's, sometimes referred to as, in slang terms, as Mac jobs, because these jobs are paid considerably less than the skilled and semi-skilled manufacturing jobs that have gone. Now, this has been compensated for to some extent by an increase in the national minimum wage and also in-work benefits, such as tax credits. However, do they compensate enough is an issue you might consider. A third cause of poverty, of course, is education. There's a strong correlation between higher skills, higher qualifications, more education, particularly university degrees, particularly in subjects like economics, medicine, dentistry, and higher wages. Law would be another one. However, if you leave school with few qualifications and you have few skills, then you have a low marginal revenue product, and it's likely to lead to low wages unless you become a self-made entrepreneur like Alan Sugar, but that's pretty unusual. Health is another key issue, as featured in the amazing film I, Daniel Blake, where he has a heart attack, and this poor physical health, and indeed it can be mental health of course, leads to a sudden and significant reduced income and a reliance on disablement benefit, if you can get disablement benefit. Otherwise you get the lower other benefits if you don't qualify. And this is particularly obviously a problem if we're talking about a chronic illness such as depression and some heart disease, for example. And then fifthly, we've got income redistribution. So countries like Sweden are quite equal with low levels of absolute and relative poverty because of considerable redistribution. This takes place through progressive taxation, that's the rich pay higher rates of income tax because they earn more, and welfare benefits, and indeed what's important in terms of welfare state is health, education and housing. And these all provide, particularly the welfare benefits, a safety net below which people can't fall. However, these have been eroded really by market-based supply-side policies, such as reducing the top rate of tax. As you know, the top rate of tax in the UK came down from 83% on earned income in 1979 to around 40% until 2009, for example. It was reduced to 40% in 1988. So the scope of redistribution has been curtailed really by market-based supply-side policies that reduce the amount of income redistribution in a number of countries, particularly countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. And indeed housing is a really important issue because housing costs for many have increased substantially, and the reason for this is perhaps because the private renter sector has increased, replacing social housing. Many council houses, for example, were sold off in the 1980s. And then the sixth factor is the life cycle factor, because once you're born poor, you're very likely to remain poor. Parental background and your childhood background have a huge income, although some escape through upward social mobility, but they tend to be rarer. The American dream tends not to take place, certainly in America, but it does actually take place more in Sweden, which is a more equal society and social mobility rates are higher. Okay, so here we have 6 key factors that determine poverty. Thank you for watching.